Kirill speaking first, no preference.
Dimitri speaking second, also no preference.
Thank you very much. Closing government.
Alex speaking first, Marina speaking second.
Can you guys hear the chair?
I think maybe Ilija froze.
Okay, I think we'll just wait for a couple of minutes for him to reconnect.
Yeah.
Sorry, I seem to be disconnected. Closing opposition, who is speaking first?
Hi, Rumen speaking first, Nikolai speaking second. We have no preferences.
Thank you very much. Before we start, just a couple of quick reminders. Please use your own timers. Don't talk longer than 7 minutes 15 seconds. Also, you can express your preference for asking POI if you have them via chat or like video. And I think we are good to go. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Prime Minister.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Ilija, you keep on freezing. Would it be better if you turn off your video?
Sure.
I hope my words will be worth listening to, so it might be good for everyone. Wonderful. So 3, 2, 1, go. What is important to note is that this debate is set in Bangladesh. This is set in a country where there's still a minimum sentence of 10 years for homosexual acts. We're talking about a country where the majority of the people are okay with sending people for a very big part, even their entire life, to prison if they are gay. We're talking here about a country where we are not on the verge of getting more LGBT rights. We're on a country where things are really, really bad. Equally, we are also at a country which is still suffering from low literacy rates and from low possibility for many people to go to good schooling and good education. So this debate is about the question, what matters more, this mechanism of improving LGBT rights versus this mechanism which has helped a lot in order to educate the society more. We do believe that LGBT rights are important, but we believe they can be achieved through better mechanism, but especially also, at least in this instance, education is more important. So now going on to the importance of education, like specifically in the country we're talking here about, the schools are incredibly underfunded, specifically the public schools, where the government already does not have much money. Even less money is going into these schools, which is happening. Second of all, there are also going to be bad teachers, because we have a vicious circle of the situation that through bad education, we unfortunately also get bad teachers within the situation. And most importantly, also, we do see issues of gender balances where girls are not allowed to be going there, or where people are pulled out of school too early because they do have to work in this situation. We also do not see that if this 10-minute school, it is actually going to be improving. But second of all, we also do believe that the schools would take far too long. So if opposition's cases, the schools are going to improve better, we also do have to note that schools are not going to be going better in the time frame that we need for all of the people who are currently benefiting from this situation. And why is this mechanism so specifically good? Because it is short, it is 10 minutes, it is a possibility that everybody might find time within the day to be getting better within this. But second of all, also it is incredibly accessible to everybody within this. Like there's a high likeliness that someone in the proximity has access to the internet, has access to a smartphone or computer within this situation. But second of all, also because it is functioning in the trend, most people are going to be having some interest in doing this. Yeah, the clarification.
Are you for removing the video or against removing the videos? Because according to the motion, you must be for removing the videos?
Yes.
Yes, we are for removing the videos which are about LGBT rights and general education. So what we are for is to keep the videos which are on school subjects, basic life skills, writing CVs. We're for taking down the topics which are on LGBT issues.
Yeah.
What is why is this so important to be? So we've already proven to you why this mechanism is so uniquely important for this area. But why does these LGBT issues make it so much worse within the situation? Because generally schools and the educator needs to be somebody who is believed and somebody who is trusted within the situation. It is not good education if the teacher is not believed. We believe this is going to be leading to the teachers not being believed. Through this, all of these good things which are getting through this education mechanisms are going to be lost once it is about these LGBT issues are there, because it is going to be down. We see this, for example, when online schools like the Khan Academy did not get involved in political issues because they were scared that they are getting politicized, because they knew that this is not happening, and this is that they would not be trusted anymore. And this is literally what is happening within this situation. So when so once these schools are not trusted anymore because general education is not enough in Bangladesh in the current status quo, we're taking away the possibility for very many people, specifically those who don't have access, don't have the money, the time, or the location to go to good schools within Bangladesh, take away the possibility that they need through this education. Because what is important to note, this is not only about subjects, but this is also about general life skills, about how to write a CV. If you write a good CV, your chances of getting a job are higher. But even if it is about more basic life skills, being taught things like healthy nutrition can literally make your life better. Education overall is improving people's lives. We are losing this if we are keeping up the LGBT things. Why? Number one, peer pressure. Like, this is the thing. We don't buy that everybody will be buying into those extremists within the situation. We don't buy we believe they are going to buy in everything that they say, but they are going to buy in some levels of this. Why? Because, as I said beforehand, Bangladesh is a very conservative country, specifically when it comes to LGBT rights. There's already an unlikeliness for people to actually be wanting to be buying into these things when they're happening within there. But then, second of all, the government is also preaching that these are bad things to be doing this. So what we believe, for number one, peer pressure. Peer pressure is going to be telling you should not be affiliated with a site which is teaching you about LGBT issues. But even more, there is going to be the narrative that everything is tainted through the lens of LGBT issues. Because this is important to note. Once they are teaching these things, once they say LGBT is good, it's okay, people are unlikely to believe that this wrong opinion and wrong ideas are not going to be also onto other things. They start questioning the other things. But then second point of impact is family will forbid. Like, this is something which is also very important for children to have within in the situation where they don't get to taught the things that are needed within in schools, where the family literally just says, you can't have this because we don't want our child to know what LGBT issues are. But then third of all, very often it goes a lot against the individual religion. So even if these people do not want the people who run 10-minute school to die, there's a possibility that there's going to be a way up in what matters most to them, whether or not their religion and being a good Muslim matters more, or the education within in the situation. And we do believe that too many people are going to be making the way up, that they care more about not doing un-Muslim things, just because religion is so important to many people within Bangladesh. Fourth reason, the politicization of the content. And this is very important to note. The government also backs the ideas of the extremists that LGBT is wrong, that gender equality shouldn't really be a thing of this. And this is where we come into the discussion about these LGBT topics being so horrifically bad. Opposition can't come up and say, like, the conversation is going to be positive when there is such an overwhelming majority of believing this, but specifically also those in power believing that LGBT issues are a problem. The discussion is going to be on the negative things, and it is going to be publicizing and making problematic the whole content of 10-minute school. What this is going to be creating is that 10-minute school will not have the possibility anymore to be educating people. Therefore, we lose the valuable education. We back it to propose. Okay, du musst in education leads to more rights machen.
I'd like to thank the speaker very much for the speech, and I would like to invite the first speaker for the opposition.
Cool, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I need a couple of seconds to sort my paper and when I will be ready to start.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. 3, 2, 1. In open opposition, we believe that the reasons that opening government outlined with the problems that currently exist in Bangladesh are not the reasons to hold the videos, but the reason to continue these videos to spread. I just want to point out that the opening government was very narrow in terms of their characterization of what the videos are, because as the info slide says, and as the motion says, it seems that the pro-Muslim conservative groups are willing to buy not just pro-LGBTQ videos, but they're also willing to buy general videos on equality, on consent, general videos that bring attention also to the equality of different minority groups within Bangladesh, because all those concepts of equality and consent apply on different spheres, especially in terms of relations between different minority groups, especially between relations with women and men. And all those things, educational processes, especially in cases where in Bangladesh, education, conventional education is such that are crucial for those people who lack an other access. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to engage in the characterization of Bangladesh and explain why even given this characterization, the case still falls on our side, and then explain why politicization is likely to occur on their side of the house or even on both sides. But then I engage in huge benefits of those videos and why safety concerns are marginal as a preemption. Cool. Firstly, let's honestly talk about politicization, because it seems that let's first talk about characterization. We think that the Bangladesh is a unique country in terms of it has a lot of different ethnicity clashes and ethnicity things as well, i.e. it's not the one their minority, their Muslim religion is very extreme. It is not the one that actually propagates very extreme Muslim culture. We think that there are different ethnic cultures that also exist equally in Bangladesh. That is, we don't think, and given that the info slide explicitly says that these 10 schools videos are very, very popular, we don't think that clash and response of Bangladeshi community is going to be especially outrageous against these videos. We think that if this country, if the startup acquiesces and actually deletes these videos, it will be more, it will actually mean more political context. Because firstly, I think that currently those startups address all those concepts in a very dispassionate manner. So we do not stick them to particular people, to particular politicians, or they do not honestly stick them to the things that they are against particular groups. That allows them to talk to the broader auditory and explain it in dispassionate manner. Then they acquiesce, they actually submit that their case is political, that they was the propaganda against one particular group. And that allows individuals to perceive other content as political as well. But secondly, not at the point which you ditch the video and remove it, you're likely to show that you are weak, that you acquiesce to pressure from different conservative groups, and that you actually value values like equality and equality and consent that you try to propagate, much less than the pressure and respect to local groups. I think that it very harms the population of startups, because the popularity of startup, because people who saw the startup as a beacon of equality, as a beacon of some alternative ideas that continuously contradict societal norms, are now genuinely frustrated because they think that they are kept from those videos and they denied access to the very important narrative that they need to have, because it is the only way. Moving to my third point, why huge benefit? What are the huge benefits of those videos? We identify three. Firstly, we say that progressive ideas are very important and they are spread only through intonation pumps, explaining that all those ideas are basically very logical. The way they actually tackle things like tackle things like conservative preconceptions is by explaining that conservatism and like some conservative beliefs are based upon illogical traditions what can be undermined, and it's not a sin, it's not a big problem. We think that currently what empowers startup to do it is in precisely that way, is that they are depoliticized, is that they do not actually respond to any political narratives coming from them, and they use it in dispassionate manner. Given that they are able to explain it, they have huge benefit, and given they are already popular and can explain it, they have a huge benefit in huge impacts on different people, on women in those countries who can feel that they are supported, on people like minority communities or LGBTQ rights who know now how can they cooperate with other people, or also on teenagers who now just learn how to engage in societal conversations and existence, and they also can benefit from watching those videos. But secondly, I think that those videos are crucial, especially for Bangladesh, because minority perceives and people in Bangladesh perceives those videos as unique, because they actually see that the people who do those videos are people who are like themselves. So it significantly differentiates from any other Western videos. So they think that those people not try to push their agenda, but try to explain values that they think important and might be important for them, like for those people, that empowers those videos and make them much more significantly important. Moreover, they are very, very unique in terms of the message, because those message usually very, 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 and like unique in terms of you don't get other resources of those messages. You don't have schools, other education is very bad. People in Bangladesh locked out of other sources of information. So it's honestly one of the unique and the only ways that they have. Third reason is a lot of people in Bangladesh and other minority communities, generally, this is what they are locked out of other sources, and that makes them unique. Secondly, fourthly, in terms of preemption, maybe we will hear things like this startup has to acquiesce to threat, because threat is very significant and it may cause some damage. We don't think that threat is significant in and of itself for three reasons. Firstly, I think because founders of a startup or people who work for a startup has enough money to, for example, hire protection, and they are incentivized to do that because their life are valued, and they actually don't want to just usually teach what they think is important because they're just threatened. But secondly, I think it's a very clear message of threat, and this is very bad message, especially for government of Bangladesh, whether it likes the messages of those schools or not, because it's just one, if government does not respond, it shows its weakness. But secondly, it's a very bad message for other businesses, because if business can easily be threatened within Bangladesh, other businesses will not be started up, other businesses will be suppressed, other businesses will not have incentive to come. And the last reason why safety is a marginal concern, because given the popularity, a lot of people will be incentivized to go against the startup and protect it, and activists will not use violence in order to, if their violence is not legitimate. For those reasons, proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the speaker very much for this speech, and now I'd like to invite the second speaker for the government.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
3, 2, 1, go. Panel, here is the structure of our argument. We need 10-minute school to provide necessary basic education in Bangladesh for those who need it most. This is only possible if they are seen as an uncontroversial and unpoliticized actor and are widely followed. We say this is impossible as long as these videos stay online, and quite likely to happen once they are removed. On the other hand, in Bangladesh, LGBTQI rights and gender equality are seen as foreign and harmful ideas by the vast majority of the population. Changing that is a structural and long-term process that is only possible once basic educational goals have been reached, right? This is why we think the videos should be deleted. Some extraneous rebuttal before I further support the material already given by my partners, right? OG says, oh, some of these videos are about less controversial topics such as consent and so on, right? Even if some of these videos are about such less controversial topics, they will be seen in light of the most controversial one, right? Consent gets tainted with the LGBTQI issue for the majority of the population, and therefore all consent advocacy is likely to be far less effective, right? Second point of rebuttal. even consent and gender balance are heavily questioned, right? The current German Minister of the Interior argued only a few years ago that it is irrelevant whether the wife consents to sex if the man wants it in Germany. So I think in Bangladesh, it's quite likely that even something such as consent will be seen as a problematic and questionable idea, right? Secondly, then opposition says, oh, but this means giving into extremists, and they present some sort of slippery slope argument of why that is bad. And now every extremist will think, oh, we can have success if we only claim something loud enough. The problem is with the specific message that these videos contain. Because they are so unlikely to convince the majority, we think that giving into extremists in this case is on the whole, on the balance of things, the better strategy, because we need to preserve basic education. We don't think this will have wide-ranging effects, because this would mean that there's something where the majority is against that. That's not like what businesses do. That is irrelevant, right? That is not, I think, the case here. The case that you need to show is why this is better for LGBTQ rights in both the short and long term, and why the educational harm that we get is something that is okay, and that is what opposition hasn't done. So why is removing these videos so crucial for our impact? How does removing these videos look like? Extending on the material of my partner, right? What we are going to do, what we think 10-minute videos is likely to do, is not say, oh, very sorry, we weren't ready for this true message. They are going to say, oh, the videos portrayed a controversial and political position that many did not appreciate, right? We heard your feedback, and now we want to focus on education for all, right? Because we don't think it's likely that just 5% of extremists think these videos were anti-Muslim. We think it's quite likely that the majority of the population and of those watching the videos are likely to buy in to that propaganda message. So we think in this way, I mean, they can even scapegoat somebody and throw that person out allegedly responsible for the videos. We think in this way, removing the videos minimizes the damage to our reputation, to the reputation of 10-minute school, and enables it to continue with its course of action, right? We cannot do that when the videos stay online, because the debate about the videos will get worse and worse in the long time due to mechanisms I'll explain in a second, right? Before that, some more on why we need basic education in Bangladesh and why 10-minute schools gives that, right? Everything is dependent on basic education that can be given in such 10-minute videos, especially for the most problematic and the most disenfranchised actor, namely those with no access to schools or good schools at all, who can't go to private schools, who can't go to good public schools. Your understanding of what is best for your individual health, for your nutrition, your ability to have good jobs and contribute to the development of your country and to be less poor, your ability to understand, participate in political debate and question positions presented there, all depends upon basic knowledge on mathematics, on being able to read, on having basic knowledge about your country and other countries, right? On knowing how to apply for a job and have basic life skills to be successful in a developing economy, which is highly competitive, right? Why does 10-minute schools give that? These videos are easy to understand and simple to access, especially to those who are the most disenfranchised, because everybody except for uncontacted tribes has some sort of internet access and reach, be it in the next village. Yeah, I think most people are likely to have a smartphone, even in Bangladesh. These videos are massively consumed, well-liked, shared, and thought about. This has a lot of impacts. Firstly, it improves the individual education of those watching the videos, but it also leads to pressure on the public schools to improve, the same way Khan Academy has done it in the US, because children can now go in, or even grown-up people can go in and say, look at these videos. They are teaching my child far better about mathematics. Why are you not doing this if we pay for you with your taxes, right? All these effects, I think, better individual education, pressure on the educational system to improve, right? And better long-term outlooks due to the improved education. And now, okay, if opposition says a 10-minute video can't make you rich in life, no, but these are a lot of videos. Kids watch a lot of videos online. We think the impact from this is quite high, right? Why do the videos harm that? Here are three mechanisms how it happens. Firstly, the extremists want to harm the 10-minute school. They want it gone entirely. This is not something that the entirety of the population wants, but the extremists. They will undertake active propaganda against it as long as it is online, right? This is far less likely once the extremists are pacified in the way that we demonstrated, because perhaps they themselves depend on such videos and can see the beneficial effect for their country, right? The activists' second mechanism will be personally endangered by such extremists, and far less people are likely to be activists to work for 10-minute school, which leads to less effectivity. I'll take a closing in a second, right? Third mechanism, because we think the propaganda from the extremists is very likely to fall on ground where the majority will believe it, there will be threat, because they see it as a threat to the core of society, and to their identity, a threat to the Muslim identity that more than 90% in Bangladesh have. They will mount significant pressure on the government to do something about 10-minute school. Before I explain why this is bad, closing.
Would you, if there is backlash towards videos about evolution or something that maybe Muslims wouldn't agree with, also take down that video?
I would say if the backlash is so significant that extremists are coming in and threatening to kill them, then maybe yes, we take down that video. But we think this is not necessary. Even in the US, with evangelical activists who are literal terrorists, it's enough to teach the controversy and say, look, evolution is an idea that is questioned by some parts. We think also evolution is again quite a high concept. I learned about it in the last year of school. We think this is about much more basic things like writing a CV, which I did in the beginning of school. This is not really about such concept. This is about stuff that needs to remain uncontroversial, basic mathematics, basic geography, language skills, writing skills, reading skills, right? The impact of the video staying online, the government giving into popular demand, trying to censor or remove this company entirely, tax it higher, whatever the government has available, is that the educational content is less relevant, less followed, because the propaganda against it will be believed. There's a lower chance of these videos being seen at all, right? We all know, panel, how detrimental online shitstorms can be even in highly developed countries, even if the actor before was seen as uncontroversial. The extremists are likely to gain significant following soon, and we need to stop that. We think other actors, and especially as my partner has shown, long-term education is what gives us a way to better LGBT rights and gender equality. These videos, unfortunately, need to go offline.
I would like to thank the speaker very much for this speech. And now I'd like to invite the second speaker for the opposition.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool, just a second.
Sure.
Three, two, one. Our case is very simple. If you buy all of the characterization of opening government, that means that Bangladesh necessarily needs all the liberal ideas and agenda that this specific startup is promoting, because the rights of many individuals currently are at threat. Knowledge is power, panel, and we think that equipping people with knowledge is enabling individuals to be protected in those countries. I'm going to do a very easy thing in my speech. First of all, I'm going to demonstrate why the educational quality that this startup provides is likely to stay on their side of the house due to other mechanisms that are likely triggered already by the success of the startup. Secondly, I will demonstrate the unique benefits of this unique content, specifically for the most vulnerable people in the country. So the most offense that we get from opening government, and by the way, like their entire way up is essentially LGBT rights are less important than education, even if they are important. But notice that there are other groups who are in this debate as well. For example, women's rights, for example, their ability to consent to various things. So obviously, when you weigh those groups and those groups who are actively harmed in the status quo, versus people who are poor, who are again the majority of people who are not in relative standing similar to other people in Bangladesh, I feel like the weighing on their side becomes intuitively harder. But moreover, why do we think that education is still going to be accessible on their side of the house? I think I have 4 mechanisms. So number one, we think that even if there are some videos that are like in promoting liberal ideologies, if the content of those videos is generally good, there is an incentive on the part of schools and on the part of people who want to be educated to still access educational content, because clearly that is providing value to people. Unclear why, just because I have a certain perception, which I'm going to disprove that you have about this group, you will not be accessing things that are actually giving benefits to you. Secondly, given that this startup is successful, which we can infer from the info slide, and apparently the entire education system is not as opening government portrays it, then clearly the government that is accountable to people, who has the incentive to educate individuals as well, to lead them out of poverty, has the incentive to consult with people who are running the startup in order to heighten the quality of its education as well, to promote educational practices and the ways of teaching that are actually effective. That's why, regardless of like on both sides of the house, we think there is an incentive to already be in touch with those individuals and copy those specific practices, therefore alleviating the quality of education entirely in the currently. Thirdly, I think that when people see currently in the status quo the quality of educational content, the ease with which teachers teach that content to the viewers, and see how qualified those people are, and then go to schools and see unqualified professors, as OG tells you, there's a clear difference between the quality of the content online and in your school, which means that you do see the difference, which means that that difference is something that you are now discontent with, because you see that there is a better way of teaching yourself or a better way of educating your children. That's how we think that the voter pressures are also intensifying on both sides of the house, regardless, because you know that there is a better way to teach your kid. But fourthly, if one startup has been successful in this country, clearly other companies can also copy the way it works currently, right? Because content online is profits, views are profits. obviously, if there is one successful startup, other startups are also incentivized to do the same thing, specifically because there is already a clear way for you of how to do this, and they prove that this can be successful. That's why there are numerous other actors on both sides of the house who are incentivized to either pressure the government to provide better educational services or other startups who are willing to enter this specific field. We think that therefore we're able to promote education on both sides of the house specifically. Now let's talk more about like why we think there are specific educational benefits to the videos that this startup posts. Number one, in terms of the content, we tell you that the reason why people are sexist or homophobic in the status quo is specifically due to their biases. We think that the idea that everyone is equal and should be treated equally is fairly intuitive. The reason why people don't follow up on that idea in the status quo is because they don't recognize that they're treating some individuals as unequal, and because of the practices that they've been socialized into that have been entrenched by the society. So the key to changing their behaviors and their views is educating them and helping them recognize that they are not actually treating individuals equally, specifically the individuals that deserve equal treatment because they are the same as you. The simple truths that women are the same as men, or that gay people are like, you know, mostly like their orientation is determined by their genes, so therefore they are just as prisoners of their body, and you know, as you are very intuitive ideas. That's why in a non-political context, when those ideas are uttered by people who look like you, those ideas are specifically powerful in terms of increasing the person's understanding and awareness of those specific issues. We think that that means that even if we don't change everyone, at least first of all, when people do have an incentive to actively target or harm a minority that is in question, they're going to question their actions once more, because now they're going to be held back by this specific idea that maybe this is something wrong to do. I think that the number of instances when aggression happens decreases. But I think secondly, most individuals who watch this, who get education, liberalized with time, they become more open to new ideas, they see new connections, they're more likely to, you know, be prone to these ideas in the long term, and more likely to change their behavior, in the very least from not being aggressive to minorities and maybe respecting women more, which is already great. I feel like in the best case scenario, it might be things like asking women for consent, it might be things like changing their voting preferences and voting pressures, right? Before I move on, OG.
If these things like don't hate trans people are so intuitive, why do trans people still get murdered by so many people? And why does religion still say that they're an abomination and horrible?
Yeah, thank you. I think that individuals are not educated enough, which we clearly solve on our sides of the house. So now they say, even if the content is good, the accessibility still matters, to which they say people in Bangladesh already don't like minorities, but their proof is, but there are laws against gay people. The question is, why do laws in Bangladesh, which the last time I checked wasn't a democracy, reflect the actual views of people? We don't think that they show you the link that is the views shared by the majority of people. Secondly, unlikely that those views are strong and that you can't change them with education. If they characterize the majority of the population as uneducated, that means that it's very hard for them to rationalize why they hold that specific view, which means that it might be very easy to refute that idea with knowledge on our side of the house. Then they say extremists are going to use propaganda against you, but notice that by definition, they are extremists, not the majority of the population. Probably if you're able to recognize that they're extremists, their ideas by definition are extreme, therefore less likely to be credible. Therefore, you're less likely to believe some extremists there are like saying different stuff. But secondly, we think that even if that propaganda campaign exists, there's likely to be proportional pushback by all the liberal Muslim movements, such as, for example, the feminist movement within their religion. But lastly, they say the religion itself is against this. But notice that in the way up, even though they say that people are going to prioritize religion, notice that you don't have to, you know, in the worst case scenarios, allow your kid to watch all of the videos. You can monitor and allow the kid to watch only educational videos. If you want the kid to have access to education, you as a parent can do that. There is no weighing your religion against education. Both of those things can coexist. So because we still have access to education and better rights, vote OO.
I would like to thank the speaker very much for the speech. And now I'd like to invite the third speaker for the government.
Okay,
First of all, a bit of rebuttal. First of all, what we will tell you is the alternatives. Notice that this startup is teaching school subjects, meaning it is probably also teaching English. We think that learning English is actually giving you a lot of access to the same content provided by, for example, other Western YouTubers that is already out there. We also think that more people speaking English means that comparatively more people will be able to study, for example, in Western countries, meaning that they will have a much more intimate view on how the enaction of these rights and these ideas actually looks in Western countries, which they can therefore then bring back. This also means that they will have more contact maybe with other NGOs that actually already focus on feminist content and on furthering rights for LGBTQ people. Also, we say that the alternative is that stuff can get worse. OO tells you that there are other startups who can provide education. We tell you this is exactly the problem. At the moment where this will become a huge discourse, we think it is more likely that the startup that will take the place of the one we have now is one that is very conservative. Notice that this conservative education startup can also be then used to further a narrative of religious propaganda, to further, for example, the views on why it is actually unnatural or whatever, and be used by the government. We think at the point where at the status quo, this will be the most likely alternative. Then also we think that the things people are most interested right now, like in the LGBTQ community there, and also like women, is probably safety. Notice that OO don't explain to you how they will actually secure the safety of those people at the moment where there's huge discourse cause and huge backlash in society. We think that this will actually be worse to them. But now onto our extension. How do we think exactly the mechanisms will work of how the startup will be taken down? First of all, we want to give you a characterization of extremists. Notice this extremists feel so strongly about their values that they're willing to spend their whole time, their whole money on furthering their opinion, pushing their ideas. Especially in the case of religious values, this means that the people think this is God's mission that they're having, that even if there is some backlash or if there are negative consequences, they think that this will be like they will have a reward in the afterlife, for example. So we think that these people will go very far to do this. Then second of all, there was a wrong characterization of OO saying that Bangladesh is very diverse. We tell you that Bangladesh actually has 19% Muslim people, meaning that even if the extremist group is small, we think they will gain a lot of support, for example, from political parties who are also Orthodox Muslims, or from other groups. And even if they're not more extremist, we think there will be people who will at least sympathize to some level with this narrative. But how will these extremist groups act? We think, like we already told you, they will cater to political parties. They will also, for example, have their own Facebook ads demonizing this startup. They can have cyber attacks, for example, taking the startup down, which will then provide a huge problem to them. They can send death threats to the CEO, but also to the people providing content, making it excessively hard. And we think they will have a lot of actions that they actually can take to make the life of the startup very miserable. So what will then happen? Notice that a startup to function needs money. What we tell you is that because of all this stuff happening, because of their startup, for example, being shut down by cyber attacks, or by alone the feeling of insecurity that the government might, for example, censor it or take it down for some time, we think that investors will feel this startup is very risky and very insecure, and they will pull out the money. Also, their stock price will probably go down. Second of all, we think the most likely way the startup is financing is by advertisement. Notice that most people will not want to have their advertisement on their website when they're drawn into this culture war, basically, and they have to go against a narrative that the government themselves is accepting. They will probably be too afraid now that they will be associated with something which can give them a lot of negative effects with a lot of other groups that they're relying on, meaning that they will lose lose money by their investors. They also probably right now are pushed by, for example, there are public schools where these videos are sometimes shown by teachers because until now they were quite uncontroversial. Notice that all of this will probably not happen because at the point where this is such a huge discussion, it will probably be too risky for teachers to show this in a classroom or have big viewings of it, meaning that the audience will be much less. Yes, PUIOO.
Actually, we give you 3 mechanisms why security will be on our side, but moreover, the only mechanism also what you give us is the cyber attack. The cyber attack by Bangladesh activists seems to be very far-fetched argument.
I don't know why, first of all, you think it's a very far-fetched argument, given that by the same metric, people learn on the internet how to speak English. They can learn on the internet how to hack stuff. And we don't actually think that this is an unrealistic scenario at all, given that hacker groups are used by terrorists all around the world. We even think that there could be more extreme groups, like if they, for example, kill even one person of this startup, we think the stigma and the pain the startup will feel and how it will be perceived will be forever changed. The thing, we give you comprehensive mechanisms of how all of this will permanently damage the perception, making it nearly impossible for the startup to earn money. What we then tell you is, in this case, where other people who might want to also have an educational startup see that being associated with these ideas actually leads to all this trouble, they will probably go in the directly opposite direction that we told you in the beginning, that meaning that they will probably be very conservative, that they will be on government line, that they will promote Muslim values. And we think this is the alternative of how things can still get worse. And you have to defend to us why your alternative education will not actually make your own cause much worse. Proud to propose. Thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker very much for this speech. And now I'd like to invite the third speaker for the opposition.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
2 seconds, please. Okay, 3, 2, 1. We're going to bring in 2 extensions in today's debate. Firstly, we are literally at the tip of actual change in Bangladesh in the context of LGBT rights, in the context of consent, in the context of social movements. We think that this decision will likely either significantly harm or throw this out of the way. Secondly, why we think the group is likely to become more harmful on their side of the house comparatively when they take those videos on. Before that, a little rebuttal to opening our government. Basically, what we think is to a large extent their case lies upon the premise that education is limited into these places. We would like to add 2 points of rebuttal. Firstly, notice that Bangladesh is ex-UK colony, meaning that many of the people there actually happen to do know English, or at least a variation of the language, that was taught to them, meaning that they can generally understand foreign subjects, foreign books, foreign letters, etc. But secondly, you have like existing mechanisms for this. You have YouTube, you have the internet, you have all of these things. To the extent you can access the startup, we see that you can access all of these other outlets. But secondly, we tell you that if this is such a problem, if the startup fails, another startup may come and like simply fill out the gap of this particular education into. We don't see a delta in this particular situation. Okay, first extension. Why we think, first of all, why we think that status quo right now is actually leaning more to progressiveness, also directly clashing with what CG brings to you. 4 reasons first. Firstly, notice that Bangladesh, after just like all of the countries in Southeast Asia, after a couple of decades have developed themselves into better economies. So you have much outsource of corporations there, you have much outsource of businesses, etc., like steel industry, Nike, these sorts of things. This way lifts up the standard of living and creates to some extent some kind of a middle class that exists there for their standards, that exists there, who, for example, can like, who, for example, has the money and the free time to like read books, understand what Western culture is. They're exposed to Western media and all of these things. But to add that, you also have the young people who have like a nuanced perspective of what Islam is. Like, for example, the image of a female Muslim, for example, wears a hijab, but the hijab isn't in black, it's in a different color. Or, for example, different nuances or spectrum of what exactly being Muslim is. For example, being a little bit more liberal with drinking, etc. So to a large extent, you have actually breaking down this. Second thing, we tell you that there are to some extent some kind of movements there who like support LGBTQ rights, feminist movement, etc., who have backing from the West and also internally, who try to gain traction and do these things. Thirdly, we tell you, and this is important, that Western companies also have a leverage in the context of the governments there. And for example, if traction becomes big and this becomes a big enough issue through the media, which is going to be silenced on their side of the house because you simply take it away, it's more likely for Western companies to actually act, and like because they have their following base of people buying their stuff, like for example Apple having many young people in Western countries to buy their stuff and it being produced there, you have big probability of them not to want to do this. And fourthly, we tell you education is bipartisan issue, which is likely that the government to support the startup or organization. All of these are reasons why if they do this in particular, you're likely to lose these benefits. Now, why are you likely to lose these benefits? Actually, now it's coming here. Because when you take the video down, you signal to society that this group has leverage in the society, that this group is a prominent group that can actually impact specific institutions and places. This means that any person who, for example, wants to further some kind of progressive agenda in Bangladesh fears for their life because they have a fearful perception of what these people could possibly do to them, and will most probably not take action and not better the situation on their side of the house. So you lose, for example, potential protests that may happen, potential meetings of these organizations, people literally fearing for their lives and not being members, etc. Stuff that can actually lead to change. But even if you don't buy this, we think that on the comparative, also the group, the extremist group, is likely to be more problematic on their side of the house for two reasons. First of all, they can sell this as a major victory. They can sell that they have sway on actual institutions that are prominent and important in society, telling that they have actual comparative ability. They can sell this as protecting the interests of the Bangladeshi people. Now, here's not. Why comparatively cannot they capitalize this on their side of the house? And this is the crucial link. These people who created the startups are actually prominent people in society. So firstly, logistics, they most probably live in the center or a place that is like a very developed infrastructure, is big, and there are a lot of cameras there, so you can't just like assassinate or harm them. But secondly, also they're likely to be guarded, etc. But it's not if these people can protect themselves, it's that this organization will never attack them. They'll never take the risk of being publicly failing to kill these people or to harm these people, the creators. Meaning that on their side of the house, they can never capitalize on the same way, and we think that actually the startup is the one to live out. But secondly, and they're likely to create a perception for themselves that they're a big group of people, that they have the capabilities to do these sorts of things and to do this. But no, the reality is that these people are actually pretty small, because usually it's a small percent of the population doing these sorts of things, and usually they're focused on like specific attacks to Muslim LGBTQ people and women, etc. Why then do them having more like, let's call it political or societal capital is problematic? Two reasons. Firstly, now they have a better mechanism to recruit people, because they're viewed as prominent, because they're viewed as having an impact, because they're viewed as the saviors and defenders of the society, etc. But secondly, it's more likely for them to receive money from specific individuals who would likely to fund these people, or them simply having the ability to search them. I'll take your opening.
Who do you think those 40% of Bangladesh who are illiterate are going to believe? These schools which say that something which is very much against their personal belief is okay, or the religious leaders who they do believe in, who will still preach LGBT is wrong?
So sure, we can, there's a delta here. We cannot claim that it's going to be the best. We think it's going to be better, and you trade this off on their side of the house. But what are the harms exactly that are going to happen by these individuals gaining more power, by these individuals? Note, in Bangladesh, especially in specific rural areas where police is likely to not be prevalent, you're likely for them to have more capability because simply they have more numbers to go on specific attacks towards individuals, beating up people, killing individuals, making sure that they're doing this. But secondly, because they're so big, you have the presence that, for example, it's less likely for these people to be open about being gay or these sorts of things. But third thing, and this is important, police and other institutions are on their side of the house are not so likely to have pushback against these sorts of groups, to investigate problems that they have done, to go to specific areas where they may potentially be impose a risk to individuals, to actually risk their own lives. Why? Because they fear an attack on them also, and they're not going to do. Similar to what happens in ghettos in the United States and why police doesn't want to do this. Because we think that we risk change, and because it's going to lead to more chaos, I beg you to oppose.
I'd like to thank the speaker very much for this speech. And now I'd like to invite the last speaker for the government.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. A lot of this debate was whether this particular startup can survive certain messaging, certain government, certain politicization. What we bring you is true on both sides, which is a startup cannot survive bankruptcy. This is our extension. This should be weighed above all teams, because OG tells you that education is good, but they fall into the trap that they never weigh 10-minute school as one educational startup versus likely alternatives that can follow this startup, given that this idea is popular, etc. Secondly, they also tell you that it will be politicized, but they never tell you this important mac that comes from our extension, which is money and access to money. OO and CO depend on 10-minute school staying successful. Our extension tells you, no matter, given that this decision that 10-minute school is making now, given the outlage that is happening now, it is a risky decision, and government's responses are not completely predictable in their best case, but are more likely to be against this startup, meaning that they're most likely not to succeed, because we know that, for example, the evaluation of startups or how companies are weighed is oftentimes under perception of being stable, and oftentimes also startups rely either on funds from investors, whether that be the government or private investors. Before I go into rebuilding, a few points of rebuttal. Look, first on the backlash from OO. They tell you there's a few points of backlash. First, the businesses. We think that businesses are more likely to go to Bangladesh at the point where their prices for labor is very cheap, and not why businesses choose to go somewhere is not ideological, but how cheap it is to produce there, how cheap it is to work there. So we think that falls out of debate. B, minorities. We don't think that minorities have the tools to systematically backlash against the government or against any institution as they wanted to, because democratically, they've been systematically excluded from democratic processes, where you have sexist narratives, where you have police brutality, where people are afraid to protest. I mean, just look at Serbia. People were beaten up because they protested against the government, and we often perceive that as a democratic country. So these people are systematically excluded, meaning the backlash is very unlikely from them, especially if the government decision was won against them, and or after having another tell us that, but you had a good experience with 10-minute school, so you're gonna want structural changes. We think that this relies on 10-minute school actually reaching a whole amount of people. Given that it is a startup, we think our extension is the most crucial, which gives you mechanical explanation that this startup can only be successful if it takes the less risky route. Because if they don't exist for a lot of time, all the benefits that OG claims don't happen because they don't exist, because they're out of money. So then OO tells us people will buy into this narrative over time. We think this is very unlikely given the characterization of Bangladesh. Most notably that one, and CO kind of contests this, even though OO agreed that there is a lot of illiteracy going on. So this is a direct knife to the characterization of all. But what we say is that we think that given that to buy into this narrative, a lot of people have to go against their beliefs, if not against their beliefs, against what their surroundings says, if not against what their surroundings says, against what a very prominent group. And notice is also the unique extension that we bring is an actual characterization of how extremists believe, because OG takes the quick route and says, oh, extremists, they actually have an influence on public opinion. What Alex gives you is actually why these people who are extremists are willing to take all the extra steps to be heard. Why these people take all the extra steps to actually have an influence on public opinion. This is crucial because this is what differentiates them from, for example, minority groups who, because these extremists oftentimes come from a majority opinion, especially in Bangladesh. So given the power asymmetry, we think it's very unlikely that minorities dominated the public discourse. We think it's much likely that actually these radical groups dominate the public discourse, especially because you also, as a government or any institution, has to be responsive to these ideas, and not actually being responsive to these ideas already legitimizes them to some extent. Then on safety, they tell us, oh, but the only thing you said is cyber attacks. We think that is not true. We think that actually bringing these people into discourse can, or actually having this content on their platform can also do a lot of things. We think that one, grouping supporters, meaning that people who are extremists, given the characterization we gave you that these people think that people who support this are the devil, you can group them. You can see who are the supporters. You can actually cancel people. You can cancel businesses who support this. You can cancel websites who support this. And note that hacking is actually a very common tactic by extremist groups. Then they tell us, then CEO wants to talk about messaging. And look, we think that it's much better that 10-minute schools takes down these videos themselves than rather likely these videos being taken down at some point by the government or this business failing. Why? And this is where our rebuilding comes into place. We tell you, given that 10-minute schools has now an easy way out to actually say, oh, this was politically controversial, we're going to take this down, it's better that they stay as an educator, because as Alex tells you, another one is very likely to be more conservative. And not only that, we don't know if they're going to be more conservative. So we think it's better to have actually a educational system or an educational platform that is popular, that we know secretly has actually these values, because it's likely to go over also how rationally they teach, for example, or how secular they are in their education. Note that we also tell you that crucial for actually having better LGBTQ minority rights is connecting with other ones. This is when we tell you that English, for example, or learning languages is one of the most crucial parts to, one, have access to content that can function as an alternative. Note that videos about consent, videos about LGBTQ is not a Bangladeshi new thing. It exists all around the world, meaning that what is lacking is the access to it. And we think that actually the social movements who do that, stand for this, are much more likely to be successful if they speak English very well, if they can know how to write a CV and can exchange and go to other countries and actually connect with this. But also, as Alex tells you, people, if they are able to go to international experience, are more likely to be more open. Because we're the only thing who bring you the mechanism of why this will not be successful. And two, we actually engage with weighing this particular startup to any other alternative. We should win this debate.
I'd like to thank the speaker very much for this speech. And now I'd like to invite the last speaker for the opposition.
Hello, I am audible, I presume?
Yes.
Okay, just 1 second then. Okay. Three, two, one, go. Okay, the first thing I want to point out in this debate is very important. I think that most of the content at this point that is about like education for everybody is pretty much out of the debate. Even closing government agrees that there are multiple other incentives already existing, and comparatively, if any team in this debate proves you any kind of changeable action or harm from the prevalence of these extremist movements, or from the or for the betterment of LGBT people in these countries and women, etc., etc., we basically on the comparative win, even if certain people from the majority have a bit less access to education. I think that the only point that they basically give you in this debate that is kind of still relevant is the point about these organizations being able to pressure the government. Notice that there's not multiple analysis as to why they have the capabilities currently of pressuring the government. We would argue that is actually on our side with the mechanism that we already established, which is basically how you're able, when you get certain wins like that, which are fairly prevalent, you can sell as being extremely important to other people who might be following you right now because you're on the news, because basically you've pressured the whole very popular company to change its policies, to remove videos because basically you look very important. On the comparative, you're far more likely to gain as a bigger organization of more extremists and as people who are much more on the media and have a much bigger voice to actually pressure the government on their side of the house, which means that this is basically feeding into our impacts. Now, I think that the main contention against our case is actually the ability to which extent does the delta actually happen? Like, is there enough more prevalence to, is there enough more people recruited? Are they engaged enough? Is this a big of a deal? And I think that if any of the teams in this debate, especially closing government, which actually had the opportunity, engage with us on this metric, we might lose this debate. But to the point in which basically everybody kind of concedes that there's going to be at least a fairly enough big in terms of these countries' ability, these extremist organizations' ability to actually recruit more members, we're basically gaining more of the harms in terms of what comes after that. So a couple of points of rebuttal, and I want to find my thing. Okay, so CG. What I tell you is firstly, basically this whole idea of it is God's mission. So extremists on the comparative want to do it, and they're going to fight back completely. I think that firstly, they never engage with rumors and lies that these extremist people are a fairly small majority. I think that yes, many people, it is normalized in Bangladesh to be anti-LGBT and anti-women. We agree with that, but we don't agree that the majority of people have normalized violence and extremism to the extent in which these particular extremist organizations are in the current squad. These are the ones who are most likely to be violent. These are the ones who are most likely to be extremely vocal. These are the ones who are most likely to take time of their day to attack people online or in person that are part of these minority groups in the debate. This is why any kind of change actually has a much more prevalent impact in the debate compared to anything else that you give in terms of that. But look, what is CGS extension essentially? Basically, more damage to this particular startup is going to signal to other startups that they better not be conservative. I think that firstly, they never proved the delta of their case. Why? On their side of the house, it is less likely for these startups to be less conservative on the comparative. I think that basically, if you are a startup right now in Bangladesh and you can make the trade-off of actually not doing it, you're not going to do it anyway, because most of the people in the status quo are not for LGBT rights to a certain degree. Why risk it anyway? Comparative is that this organization in particular has already done that. They have already, to whatever reasons, maybe they're just very brave or they don't care, they have promoted that content. It's out there. So it's very important the message that society gets once this has actually been done. Is this the new era? Are things going to change in terms of, can extremist organization just remove you and basically ride this wave of power or not? On the comparative, I think that we prove to you why our harms are much bigger. And I think that, look, if you only care, wait, what is this? Yeah. Okay, so look, on the comparative, we have to a certain degree existing groups that actually want to do some things about women or LGBT groups. First of all, like Western organizations that have certain presence even online to these groups because they care, because people are there very disenfranchised. Second of all, like certain like even secret societies or NGOs or even people who are creating safe spaces for LGBT people who are able to, on the comparative, know that they can like still promote a meeting online and not know that like a very powerful extremist organization is going to see that and actually go and attack them in space, etc., etc. I think these kind of small changes are the first step to at least a better normalization, at least more safety for these people, which on the comparative is better when these extremist organizations are not as important in society. In this particular case, I think that becomes extremely important. I think that another example that we get from opposing government is this canceling people point. To the moment in which, again, on the comparative, these extremist organizations are more powerful, then they're much more able to cancel people and for people to follow their cancel campaigns or whatever. Even like Hollywood actors who are, let's say, from Bangladeshi descent, or other public figures who are from Bangladeshi descent, who, let's say, are in the West, who are speaking out against problems, they're likely to cancel them in Bangladesh themselves. I think on the comparative, these people are able to reach some people because they're prominent figures who are successful, who are in the West right now, and people like them because they're basically share the same nationality. At least it's a certain minor change for LGBT people in this campaign. At the end of the day, like the important thing in terms of comparing to opening is that all of their argument is basically dependent on these particular videos who are existing right now to change certain types of behavior, which I don't think is extremely comparative in this debate.
I'd like to thank Speaker very much for this speech, as well